Cats is about an orange house cat named Rusty, who wanders out into the woods one day and befriends a wildcat. The wildcat's superiors appear, and one of them's like, "Hey, you want to join our cult?" And Rusty says, "Yeah," and he gets renamed Firepaw because in the cat clans your name changes with your status. Anyway, there's this evil forest cat named Tigerstar who wants to take over the world, but Firepaw says no. He becomes a warrior named Fireheart and then becomes Firestar, and at this point we're 6 books into the series and he's finally ready to have this epic showdown with Tigerstar over the fate of the forest. But right before they can go at it, this random new city cat named Scourge appears from the neighboring town like, okay, and with one strike he guts Tigerstar from his throat to the belly and he dies. So the arch nemesis of the series is defeated by this rando, and Firestar's over there freaking out like, "Who the heck are you?" And apparently the authors, a group of writers working under the shared pseudonym Aaron Hunter, had the same question. When I first created him, I must confess I didn't think about his past, one wrote in the Rise of Scourge's introduction. But when I stopped to consider what might have shaped his character, I realized that this was a story that could be very interesting to explore. A manga novel seemed like the perfect opportunity to go back to Scourge's origins. And so the Hunters reached out to comic writers and artists. One day while I was talking to my editor, he mentioned that HarperCollins wanted to do some manga side stories related to the Warriors novels, the writer of the Warriors manga adaptations told me. At that point, I had never read any of the Warriors books, a situation I quickly rectified, but I was and still am a huge cat person. So I told my editor that I wanted that job and that he'd better not approach any of the other writers about it because I wanted to write about cats, damn it! I wasn't able to get in contact with the Rise of Scourge's illustrator, Bettina M. Krakowski, but I want to know why they didn't let her do more Warriors books because, oh, I love her, don't they love her? The Rise of Scourge proceeded as a collaborative effort between the Hunters, Jolly, and Krakowski. Jolly enjoyed some elbow room under the Hunters. I asked him what it was like working with them, and he responded, "They strike a really nice balance between being protective of their property, for which I don't blame them one bit, and letting me stretch creatively. Basically, they give me an outline of the story they want to see, and they let me handle the pacing, the reveals, the details of the characterization, and the dialogue. And, of course, all the nuts and bolts involved in writing a comic book script. Directions to the artist, to the number of panels on the page, all the sound effects, etc." So you're saying I can blame you for all of this, Jolly? Well, I like it. No, I don't have the original copy with me. I left it at home. My home is in Montana. And our house is being rented out. And I'm currently in Rhode Island. So... time to make a critique for comics class.
Natalie Lynn hasn't read this book since she was around 14 years old. Returning to the story at 22, she is finally ready to critique it with all of her 2 remaining brain cells. These are her thoughts.
The whole point of this story is to explore how a tiny innocent house kitten like Firestar could end up in such a drastically different, dark situation. So for this story to be successful, it needed to make sense of Scourge's actions, and that meant getting into Scourge's head, so we get Scourge as the narrator. The language used to narrate Scourge's kittenhood is super cutesy, only breaking occasionally to hint at a dark potential underneath. What's interesting to me is how Scourge grows out of his idealistic worldview much faster than his childish vocabulary. It creates an unsettling contrast to read a character talk about fighting to the death in the voice of a young child. Take this part, for example. I figure I can... Sorry. What? You okay? Yeah. I figure I could get a better idea of things if I can see more. It's not too hard to climb up to the top of the big 2-leg den. Wow, there's a lot more cats around here than I thought. And they're all really hungry. The dog's keeping them from a lot of food. I remember Mama talking about how savage the forest cats were, but I don't think these cats are any better. I don't want to. I really don't want to. But I better get a look at what's causing all these problems. Oh no, it's huge. I don't want to fight this dog. I can't. I'm just a kit. Plus I'm scared to death. But all those cats down there are afraid too. We're all afraid together. I think about running away again. But where? Like it or not, this place is my home now. I have to fight, even if it kills me. The phrase big two-leg den, wow, plus I'm scared to death, along with a recurring use of the term create that childish tone, while the actual subject matter revolves around starving animals and Scourge's impending demise. You have to sympathize with the guy, who was forced to grow up so fast his vocabulary couldn't catch up. There's no singular moment in this story where the language grows up, so to speak. That childish tone has almost disappeared by page 61, right when the alley cats accept Scourge as an authority figure. His darker moments, when he thinks fondly of revenge or speaks cynically about the cats around him, appear more frequently. But what I really enjoy is even as Scourge becomes older and his language more eloquent, he still regresses when confronted by bullies. All it takes is a cat making a jibe at him, and suddenly he's that scared kitten again, determined to prove that he's big and strong. I feel like some would argue that this scene came too abruptly, that Scourge should have felt more torn about his actions after the fact. But if there's anything this narrative returns to over and over again, it's Scourge's obsession with proving himself. From kittenhood to adulthood, with fairy tales and later public executions, his goals are centered around making everyone believe he is strong. In such a way, the book ends perfectly as far as I'm concerned, closing on what's probably the peak of Scourge's life, with him killing the last of his doubters, standing over his body as though daring someone else to challenge his authority. Also, I have a couple favorite parts of this comic, and one of them is definitely the moment where this cat hears Scourge's story and is like, "Is that a fact?" Some people really don't like this style, and that's totally valid. Personally, I love it. The kids look kinda stiff and funky in some of the panels, but the cats are always drawn in such dynamic poses, and I love the range of emotion Kukowski achieved with this style. Even if you don't like the style aesthetically, I think most people would agree it's effective in terms of communicating the characters' thoughts and feelings. Sometimes the pages themselves get a little crowded looking, with panels overlapping the characters by a large margin, but it didn't interfere with my own reading experience. It helps that Scourge is a black cat, since the spot blacks always draw the eye straight to him in the midst of the more complex backgrounds. I'm also a huge fan of the angled shots in this story. A lot of these backgrounds are shown from above or below, most often to make the cat characters look tiny compared to their surroundings. It really emphasizes the scope of Scourge's world. The city is already big enough for your average cat, and he's the runt of his litter. It drives home exactly what Scourge is up against. I noticed going back through this comic that there are a lot of canted angles as well. I'm not sure how I feel about their sheer abundance. I think I've decided I like them. They make the comic feel more dynamic. They allow for wider shots of the background in a limited page space as well, which adds to a sense of wider environment beyond the page. God, I gotta find something negative to say. Okay, the character designs. I'm hella guilty of this too. Look at Golden Flower and Sandstorm for my comic. They're way too similar. But was I the only one who thought Brick and this elder under the crate were the same cat? It wasn't until I reread the comic now as an adult that I realized they were different characters. It should have registered, maybe. Brick doesn't have the graying muzzle and ear tips, and the crate cat doesn't have a white splotch or scar on their back, but eh. For those of you who read this as a kid, let me know whether you had a similar problem. I loved this comic as a kid. It inspired me to draw and make my own fan comics. Coming back to it as an adult, I didn't expect it to hold up to my ridiculous standards. But I am happy to report that I still find this comic hella solid. The art and writing work in tandem to successfully answer the question of what separates Firestar from Scourge. From what I've gleaned from the book, it's the way they respond to harassment. The kitty pet jibes got to Firestar, but as he got older he learned to ignore them. He proved everyone wrong by being his best self. Scourge never learned to let go. As he got older, he only clung harder to those insults until they twisted him up inside. And he proved all his bullies wrong by murdering a bunch of cats. And I guess both methods worked.
You won't pull ahead, I'll keep up the pace, and I'll reveal my strength to the whole human race. Yes, I am prepared to stay alive. I won't forgive. Vengeance is mine, and I won't give in, because I choose to thrive.